I have spent 10 years building a kingdom on the bones of my enemies. I've survived hits, betrayals, and the cold silence of a dead wife's bed. But I am being hunted in my own hallways. Not by a man with a gun, but by the woman who tucks my children in at night.
You were at the docks tonight, Barbara. I saw your shadow in the warehouse. I smelled your sandalwood on the man I just killed. Tell me why I shouldn't snap your neck right here, in the house you've turned into a cage.
Because your heart is beating faster than mine, Taehyun. You're not angry that I was at the docks. You're angry because for the first time in your life, you've met a woman who doesn't need your permission to breathe. If you want to kill me, do it. But don't you dare lie to me and call it business. This is about the fact that you want me more than you want your next breath.
She is the nanny. She is the guardian. She is the ghost that haunts my every waking thought. And tonight, the King of the Bronx is going to find out if she's my savior or my executioner.
Before we dive into the heart of this story, I want to know who I'm talking to. Drop your city or country in the comments so I can see how far this story is reaching. And if you haven't joined the family yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You aren't going to want to miss how this unfolds.
The Bronx night was a bruised purple, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my study. Rain lashed against the glass, sounding like 1,000 frantic fingernails trying to claw their way inside. I sat in the darkness, the only warmth coming from the heavy crystal glass in my hand. The whiskey was old, biting, and did absolutely nothing to dull the edge of my nerves. Across the room, Barbara sat on the edge of the velvet chaise. She hadn't turned on a lamp. She didn't need to. The streetlights from the avenue below cast long skeletal shadows across her face, highlighting the sharp, regal line of her jaw and the deep mahogany of her skin. She was reading. Or pretending to. I watched the way her thumb traced the edge of the page. It was a slow, rhythmic motion, the kind of touch that suggested she knew exactly how much power she held in the tips of her fingers. My chest felt tight, my lungs struggling against the invisible pressure she brought into every room. It had been 2 years since So-yoon's funeral, 2 years since this house felt like anything other than a tomb, yet here was this woman, breathing life back into the hallways, and I hated her for it. "The ice is melting, Taehyun," she said. Her voice didn't break the silence. It slid through it like a blade through silk. I looked down at my glass. The cubes had shrunk to slivers, floating in the amber liquid. I hadn't taken a sip in 20 minutes. I had been too busy counting the seconds between her breaths. "I like it cold," I rasped. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, low, rough, and hungry. I stood up. The movement was a warning. My joints felt like coiled springs as I crossed the rug, the silence of the room amplifying the thud of my heart. I stopped just short of her. The scent of her hit me, not the perfume So-yoon used to wear, but something deeper. Sandalwood, rain, and the faint metallic scent of the Bronx streets. I leaned down, bracing my hands on the back of the chaise, caging her in. I could feel the heat radiating off her shoulders. The fine hairs on her neck stood up, a physical reaction she couldn't hide, even if her face remained a mask of stone. "My wife was a saint," I whispered, my lips inches from the shell of her ear. "She saw the best in people. She saw something in you that made her think you belonged in a house full of monsters. But I look at you, Barbara, and I don't see a saint." I watched a single pulse point jump in her throat. She slowly closed the book and turned her head. We were so close that our breaths mingled in the cold air, a ghost of an intimacy we hadn't earned. "What do you see then, Taehyun?" she asked. Her eyes were dark, hooded, and entirely too steady. She didn't pull back. If anything, she tilted her chin up, daring me to bridge the final inch. "I see a woman who knows too much," I said, my gaze dropping to her mouth. "I see a woman who walks through my gates like she owns the key to every lock. And I wonder, if I should fire you, or if I should lock you in the cellar until you tell me why you look at me like you're the one holding the leash."
He was vibrating. I could feel it through the furniture, a low-frequency hum of rage and repressed desire. Taehyun was a man who lived by the sword, and right now, he was trying to use his presence like a blunt instrument to break me. But I had been broken by experts. He was an amateur compared to the shadows I had outrun. I didn't flinch when his shadow fell over me. I didn't move when his breath, warm and smelling of expensive peat, brushed against my skin. Instead, I let my eyes wander over him. He was beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful, destructive, chaotic, and inevitable. His white shirt was unbuttoned just enough to show the tension in his collarbones, and his knuckles were white where he gripped the chair. "You won't fire me," I said softly. I reached up, my hand moving with agonizing slowness. I saw his eyes track my fingers as I touched the lapel of his suit. I didn't grab it. I just let my fingertips graze the expensive wool, feeling the hard muscle of his chest underneath. He let out a jagged breath. It was the first crack in his armor. "You won't fire me," I repeated, "because I'm the only person in this borough who doesn't want anything from you. Not your money, not your power, and certainly not your fear. You're terrified, Taehyun. Not of your enemies. You're terrified of the fact that when I'm in the room, you feel like a man instead of a ghost." I felt his hand move. His fingers brushed the hair away from my temple, a gesture that was supposed to be threatening but felt like a prayer. His touch was electric, a searing heat that sent a jolt straight down my spine. My stomach did a slow, heavy flip. "You think you know me," he growled. His hand moved to the back of my neck, his thumb resting just under my jaw. He wasn't squeezing, but the weight of his palm was an anchor. "I know you're holding your breath," I whispered. I leaned in, my lips almost grazing his. The tension was a living thing now, a cord stretched to the point of snapping. "I know that if I left this house tonight, you'd burn the Bronx to the ground just to find the smoke." He didn't pull away. He stayed there, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, his eyes searching mine for a weakness I wouldn't give him. For a moment, the boss was gone. There was only the widower, the man who was drowning in a sea of silence, reaching for the only hand that wasn't trying to push him under. Then, the clock in the hall struck one. The sound was like a gunshot. Taehyun recoiled as if he'd been burned. He stood up straight, smoothing his shirt with trembling hands, the mask of the syndicate head slamming back into place so fast it was jarring. "Go to your room, Barbara," he said, his voice cold once more. "And don't forget why you're here. You're the nanny. Nothing more." I stood up, smoothing my own skirt, my heart still hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I picked up my book and walked toward the door. I stopped at the threshold, looking back at him over my shoulder. He was already back at the window, staring into the rain, a man alone in his own fortress. "Good night, Taehyun," I said. "Try to remember that the nanny is the only reason your children haven't forgotten the sound of their own names." I walked out, the click of my heels echoing in the empty hall. I didn't tell him that my hands were shaking too. I didn't tell him that the flash drive in my pocket was burning a hole in my thigh. The game had begun. And in the Bronx, the first person to blink usually ended up dead.
Morning in the Bronx arrived with the gray, suffocating weight of a wet wool blanket. I stood on the second-floor balcony, my hands gripping the cold iron railing until the metal bit into my palms. Below, in the foyer, the daily ritual was beginning. It was a play I watched from the shadows, a voyeur in my own home. Barbara was kneeling on the marble floor, her back straight as a spear. She was zipping up Hannah's coat, her fingers moving with a deftness that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times before. Minjun stood to the side, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his small face mimicking the same stoic mask I wore. She reached out and adjusted the boy's collar. She didn't coddle him, she straightened him. She treated my son like a prince preparing for battle, not a child going to school. I felt a slow, heavy thud in my chest. It wasn't just desire anymore. It was the terrifying realization that she had integrated herself into the very DNA of my family. She was the marrow in our bones, and without her, we would collapse into a pile of ash. "Daddy's watching," Hannah whispered, her eyes darting toward the balcony. Barbara didn't look up immediately. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind Hannah's ear, her movements deliberate. Only then did her gaze lift. Her dark eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, the air in the foyer seemed to thin. I felt the phantom sensation of her fingertips on my lapel from the night before. My skin prickled. My jaw tightened so hard it ached. She didn't smile. She gave a single sharp nod, the salute of one general to another, before ushering the children out the door. The silence that followed their departure was deafening. I retreated to the kit tiler, the heels of my Italian leather shoes clicking against the tile like a ticking clock. The household staff moved like ghosts, avoiding my eyes. They knew my moods. They knew that a single wrong word today could result in a one-way trip to the docks. My breakfast sat on the mahogany island. A simple bowl of porridge, still steaming. I reached for the spoon, but my hand stopped mid-air. The scent hit me first. Most would have missed it over the smell of toasted oats and honey. But I had spent a decade inhaling the chemical stenches of the underworld. Underneath the sweetness was a sharp, bitter tang, like crushed cherry pits or wet copper. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stared at the bowl, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling. My stomach turned, a cold knot of dread tying itself around my spine. "Is something wrong, sir?" The voice belonged to the cook, a man who had served my family for 5 years. He was sweating. A thin sheen of moisture coated his upper lip. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the porridge. "Tell me," I said, my voice dropping to a low, predatory hum. "Does the recipe call for bitter almonds today?" The sound of his sharp intake of breath was the only answer I needed. I didn't yell. I didn't reach for the gun holstered at the small of my back. I simply picked up the bowl and dumped the contents into the sink. I watched the sludge disappear down the drain, the metallic scent lingering in the air like a threat. "Get out," I whispered. He didn't wait. He scrambled from the room, and I was alone again. My own house was trying to eat me. My loyal staff was feeding me a slow death. And the only person who seemed to see the shadows moving behind the curtains was the woman who was currently 40 blocks away, keeping my children safe.
The city was a cacophony of sirens and screeching tires, but inside my head, it was a different kind of loud. I sat on a park bench across from the children's school, my hand resting on the heavy leather bag in my lap. Inside, tucked beneath a layer of wet wipes and coloring books, was an encrypted tablet and a 9mm subcompact. My eyes didn't stop moving. I scanned the sidewalk, the parked cars, the delivery trucks. I looked for the telltale dip of a shoulder, the glint of a lens, the hesitation in a step. I was late. I was supposed to be at the grocery store, but I had a meeting. A man in a gray hoodie sat on the other end of the bench. He didn't look at me. He tossed a handful of birdseed to the pigeons. "He's starting to notice," the man whispered. "Taehyun notices everything," I replied, my voice flat. "He's a predator. It's what he does. The second in command is moving faster than we thought. The Kit Tyler is compromised. The security team is splitting. You need to pull the kids out, Barbara. The contract is over." I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in my chest at the thought of leaving. I pictured Hannah's laugh. I pictured the way Minjun looked at me for approval. And then I pictured Taehyun, the way his eyes darkened when I stood my ground, the way his hand had trembled when it grazed my neck. "Not yet," I said, my voice like iron. "I promised Soyun I'd protect them. That includes protecting him. He's the boss of the Bronx. He doesn't need a nanny to save his life. He doesn't even know his own life is on fire," I countered. I stood up, my knees stiff from the cold. I didn't look back at the man in the hoodie. I walked toward the subway, my mind racing. I needed to get back. I needed to see him. By the time I reached the brownstone, it was nearly midnight. The rain had returned, a fine mist that clung to my hair and coat. The house was dark, save for a single light in the Kit Tyler. I pushed the door open, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked into the Kit Tyler and stopped. Taehyun was leaning against the island, his sleeves rolled up, revealing the intricate black ink of the tattoos that spiraled up his forearms. He was holding a glass of water, his knuckles white. The air in the room felt ionized, like the moments before a lightning strike. "You're late," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. He pushed a bowl toward me. It was empty, save for a thin, dry residue at the bottom. "I almost ate this today," he said, his voice a ragged whisper. "And then I realized, you weren't here to taste it first." I walked toward him, my heels clicking sharply on the tile. I didn't stop until I was in his space, until I could smell the cold rain on his skin and the raw tension radiating off his body. I reached out and took the bowl from his hand. Our fingers touched, cold skin against burning heat. I didn't pull away. I leaned in, my face inches from his. "You think I'm the one who wants you dead, Taehyun?" I whispered. I could see the dark centers of his eyes blooming, swallowing the light. I could see the way his throat moved as he swallowed. "I think you're the only one I can't control," he growled. He reached out, his hand wrapping around the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my damp hair. He pulled me closer, forcing my head back. "Tell me where you were. Tell me who you were with." "I was saving your life," I said, my voice steady even as my body began to tremble. "But if you want to play the boss tonight, go ahead. Choke me. Intimidate me. But while you're busy trying to break me, the men you trust are sharpening the knives for your back." He stared at me, his breathing heavy and jagged. His thumb traced the line of my jaw, a touch that was half caress, half stranglehold. For a long, agonizing moment, I thought he was going to pull me into him. I wanted it. I wanted to feel the weight of his obsession crush the secrets right out of me. Instead, he let go. He stepped back, the mask of the Ice King slamming back into place. "Don't be late again," he said, his voice cold. He walked out of the Kit Tyler without a backward glance. I stood there, my skin humming, my heart a frantic bird in a cage. I looked at the empty bowl in the sink. The silence of the house had never felt more like a grave.
The digital heartbeat of the syndicate lived in the basement, a climate-controlled sanctuary of humming servers and glowing blue monitors. Usually, this room felt like my throne, the place where I could see every corner of the Bronx without leaving my chair. But tonight, the air felt thin, tainted by the metallic tang of the morning's failed poisoning. I sat before the main console, my eyes burning from hours of scrolling through timestamps. I wasn't looking for my enemies outside. I was looking for the ghost inside my house. I pulled up the footage from the previous night. There she was. Barbara. She moved through the Kit Tyler at 11:45 p.m. like a shadow through water, fluid, silent, and hauntingly efficient. I watched her hand move toward the sink, dumping the contents of a small vial. My pulse spiked. Was she the one? Was the boss lady persona just a mask for an assassin? I leaned in, my face inches from the screen. I zoomed in on the Kit Tyler counter, the pixels smoothing out. But as the image cleared, the screen flickered. A line of static tore through the frame, followed by a rhythmic pulse of black and white. My brow furrowed. I checked the camera on the north gate. Static. The nursery camera? Static. What are you doing, Barbara? I whispered to the empty room. I began to dig deeper into the code. I wasn't just a man who gave orders. I had built these systems myself in the early days to protect So-Yoon. I knew every backdoor. But as I peeled back the layers of the encryption, I found a secondary network, a ghost system running parallel to my own. It was a digital parasite, feeding off my power but answering to a different master. Every time Barbara entered a room, the cameras didn't just malfunction, they were being fed a loop of previous footage. She wasn't just hiding her actions, she was rewriting reality in real time. A soft click sounded behind me. The heavy steel door to the server room hadn't opened, but the air pressure had changed. I didn't reach for my gun. I knew the scent of that rain-soaked sandalwood too well. Searching for ghosts in the machine, Taehyun? I didn't turn around. I watched her reflection in the dark glass of the monitors. She was standing in the doorway, wearing a silk robe the color of deep wine. It was loosely tied, the fabric clinging to the curve of her hip, her hair loose and spilling over her shoulders like dark silk. I built this system to be impenetrable, I said, my voice echoing in the small room. How did you find the blind spots? I didn't find them, she said, walking toward me. The click of her slippers on the raised floor was a slow, rhythmic torture. I created them. Your wife knew your world would eventually try to swallow your children. She wanted them to have a place where even you couldn't see them. She stopped behind my chair. I felt the heat of her body radiating against my back. She leaned over, her arm brushing mine as she reached for the keyboard. The scent of her, warm skin and something sharp like ozone, clouded my judgment. My hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Barbara's POV. His grip was like iron, his skin burning against mine. I didn't pull away. I leaned into the tension, my chest inches from the back of his head. I could see the fine hairs on the nape of his neck standing up. He was a man drowning in a sea of data, and I was the anchor he didn't want to admit he needed. Tell me the truth, he growled, his voice vibrating through my arm. He turned the chair sharply, forcing me to stand between his legs. The proximity was a physical blow. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his jaw covered in a day's worth of stubble. But his eyes, they were electric. They roved over my face with a hunger that made my knees feel weak. He wasn't just looking for secrets anymore. He was looking for a reason to snap. The truth is that you're looking at the wrong screen, I whispered. I reached down with my free hand, my fingers grazing his thigh as I tapped a sequence on the secondary keypad. He stiffened, a sharp intake of breath hitching in his throat. I felt the muscle in his leg jump under my touch. I didn't move my hand. I let it rest there, the heat of his body seeping through his trousers and into my palm. On the center monitor, a new feed appeared. It wasn't the house. It was a bird's-eye view of a warehouse in the South Bronx, Taehyun's primary distribution hub. "Look at the south loading dock," I commanded. Taehyun's gaze flicked to the screen, but his hand didn't let go of my wrist. His grip actually tightened, pulling me a fraction closer until I was forced to brace my other hand on his shoulder. We were a tangle of limbs and suppressed breathing in the blue glow of the monitors. On the screen, 3 of his most trusted lieutenants were meeting with a man in a tailored charcoal suit, a representative from the sole rival family. Money was being exchanged. Maps were being spread out. "They're selling your routes," I said, my voice dropping to a low, jagged rasp. "While you're busy trying to decide if I'm the enemy, they're already dividing up your kingdom." Taehyun's eyes narrowed, the Ice King returning in full force. But he didn't push me away. He stood up, his height forcing me back a step, but he kept his hand on my neck, his thumb resting against the racing pulse in my throat. He looked down at me, his face inches from mine, his expression a chaotic mix of fury and raw, unadulterated possession. "Why tell me now?" he asked. "You could have let them take me out. You could have taken the children and disappeared with the exit strategy my wife gave you." "Because," I said, my voice trembling for the first time, "I don't like seeing things that belong to me being destroyed." The word belong hung in the air like a live wire. Taehyun's gaze dropped to my lips. The air between us was screaming, a high-tension wire ready to snap. I saw the moment he lost the battle with himself. His hand slid into my hair, his fingers tangling in the curls as he tilted my head back. "You think I belong to you, Barbara?" he whispered, his breath hot against my mouth. "A nanny from the Bronx thinks she can own the king of the syndicate?" "I think the king is currently standing in a dark room, holding on to me like I'm his last breath," I countered. He let out a low guttural sound, halfway between a laugh and a growl. He leaned in, his nose brushing mine, his lips so close I could feel the heat radiating off them. My eyes fluttered shut, my body leaning into his, seeking the solid, dangerous weight of him. But then, the alarm on the console began to chirp, a high-pitched, insistent warning. A motion sensor at the nursery door had been tripped. Taehyun was gone in an instant. The heat disappeared, replaced by the cold, sterile air of the server room. He was already at the door, his hand on his weapon, his face a mask of lethal intent. "Stay here," he commanded, not looking back. "Lock the door. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, take the children through the tunnel." I watched him disappear into the shadows of the hallway. I stood in the blue light, my heart battering my ribs, the skin where he had touched me still burning. I looked at the monitor. The traitors were still talking, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over their heads. I didn't lock the door. I reached into the hidden pocket of my robe and pulled out my own piece. If Taehyun was going to war, he wasn't going alone.
His grip was like iron, his skin burning against mine. I didn't pull away. I leaned into the tension, my chest inches from the back of his head. I could see the fine hairs on the nape of his neck standing up. He was a man drowning in a sea of data, and I was the anchor he didn't want to admit he needed. "Tell me the truth," he growled, his voice vibrating through my arm. He turned the chair sharply, forcing me to stand between his legs. The proximity was a physical blow. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his jaw covered in a day's worth of stubble. But his eyes, they were electric. They roved over my face with a hunger that made my knees feel weak. He wasn't just looking for secrets anymore. He was looking for a reason to snap. "The truth is that you're looking at the wrong screen," I whispered. I reached down with my free hand, my fingers grazing his thigh as I tapped a sequence on the secondary keypad. He stiffened, a sharp intake of breath hitching in his throat. I felt the muscle in his leg jump under my touch. I didn't move my hand. I let it rest there, the heat of his body seeping through his trousers and into my palm. On the center monitor, a new feed appeared. It wasn't the house. It was a bird's-eye view of a warehouse in the South Bronx, Taehyun's primary distribution hub. "Look at the south loading dock," I commanded. Taehyun's gaze flicked to the screen, but his hand didn't let go of my wrist. His grip actually tightened, pulling me a fraction closer until I was forced to brace my other hand on his shoulder. We were a tangle of limbs and suppressed breathing in the blue glow of the monitors. On the screen, 3 of his most trusted lieutenants were meeting with a man in a tailored charcoal suit, a representative from the sole rival family. Money was being exchanged. Maps were being spread out. "They're selling your routes," I said, my voice dropping to a low, jagged rasp. "While you're busy trying to decide if I'm the enemy, they're already dividing up your kingdom." Taehyun's eyes narrowed, the Ice King, returning in full force. But he didn't push me away. He stood up, his height forcing me back a step, but he kept his hand on my neck, his thumb resting against the racing pulse in my throat. He looked down at me, his face inches from mine, his expression a chaotic mix of fury and raw, unadulterated possession. "Why tell me now?" he asked. "You could have let them take me out. You could have taken the children and disappeared with the exit strategy my wife gave you." "Because," I said, my voice trembling for the first time, "I don't like seeing things that belong to me being destroyed." The word belong hung in the air like a live wire. Taehyun's gaze dropped to my lips. The air between us was screaming, a high-tension wire ready to snap. I saw the moment he lost the battle with himself. His hand slid into my hair, his fingers tangling in the curls as he tilted my head back. "You think I belong to you, Barbara?" he whispered, his breath hot against my mouth. "A nanny from the Bronx thinks she can own the king of the syndicate? I think the king is currently standing in a dark room, holding on to me like I'm his last breath," I countered. He let out a low, guttural sound, halfway between a laugh and a growl. He leaned in, his nose brushing mine, his lips so close I could feel the heat radiating off them. My eyes fluttered shut, my body leaning into his, seeking the solid, dangerous weight of him. But then, the alarm on the console began to chirp, a high-pitched, insistent warning. A motion sensor at the nursery door had been tripped. Taehyun was gone in an instant. The heat disappeared, replaced by the cold, sterile air of the server room. He was already at the door, his hand on his weapon, his face a mask of lethal intent. "Stay here," he commanded, not looking back. "Lock the door. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, take the children through the tunnel." I watched him disappear into the shadows of the hallway. I stood in the blue light, my heart battering my ribs, the skin where he had touched me still burning. I looked at the monitor. The traitors were still talking, oblivious to the storm that was about to break over their heads. I didn't lock the door. I reached into the hidden pocket of my robe and pulled out my own piece. If Taehyun was going to war, he wasn't going alone.
The nursery alarm had been a false lead, a calculated distraction to see how I'd move. My loyal men were testing the perimeter of my soul. But while they watched the gates, I watched the woman. It was 11:58 p.m. I stood on the roof of the brownstone, the cold Bronx rain soaking through my shirt. I didn't care about the chill. I was focused on the back alley where a black SUV idled without lights at the corner of 138th Street. The service door creaked. Barbara stepped out in a charcoal leather jacket, her hair tucked under a dark cap. She moved with predatory silence that made my blood run hot and cold. She didn't look back. She slid into the SUV, and it vanished into the gloom. My jaw tightened until I heard bone pop. I didn't call my security team. I couldn't trust them. I pulled the tarp off the Ducati and followed. The chase took me to Hunts Point Market, where the air smells of rotting fish and diesel. The SUV stopped behind a derelict warehouse, one that officially belonged to a shell company I hadn't checked in years. I parked a block away and moved through shadows of rusted shipping containers, hand on my Beretta. Through a cracked second-floor window, I saw her. Standing in a room lit by a single halogen lamp. A scarred man in rival crew colors handed her a military-grade briefcase. She opened it. Green glow from tactical hardware reflected in her eyes as she checked a canister seal, fingers moving with terrifying familiarity. My heart battered my ribs. Was this the protection So Yoon hired? Or was I watching my execution being purchased by the woman who slept down the hall for my children? Then she looked toward the window. Her expression didn't change, but she slowly traced the line of her jaw, the exact spot where I'd touched her in the server room. A signal. A taunt. A promise.
I knew he was there. Taehyun thinks he's a ghost, but I've been living with ghosts for 3 years. I felt his gaze on my neck, heavy as the humidity before a storm. "The shipment is clean," the man said, voice like sandpaper. "But the syndicate is asking questions. Your boss is sniffing around the deal. Let him sniff." I snapped the briefcase shut. Taehyun is looking for an enemy he can shoot. He isn't ready for the one already sitting at his table. I took the case and walked toward the exit, boots clicking rhythmically. I didn't look at the window where I knew he crouched. If I acknowledged him, the game would end too soon. I returned to the brownstone at 2 a.m. The house was silent but charged, vibrating with tension that raised the hair on my arms. A small voice stopped me at the base of the stairs. "You smell like smoke." Minjun stood in the hallway, clutching his astronomy book. 8 years old and already too observant, too much like his father. He wore Spider-Man pajamas that were getting too small, the cuffs riding up his ankles. Couldn't sleep? I asked, keeping my voice soft. Dad's heart rate goes up when you leave. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was reading data. I can hear him pacing. His office door opens and closes 17 times. I crouch to his level, noting the dark circles under his eyes. You've been counting? I count everything now. His lip trembled slightly. Mom used to say numbers don't lie. But Dad lies about being okay, and you lie about where you go. The accusation hit harder than any of Taehyun's threats. I reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind his ear. The same gesture I'd seen Soyun do in the photos. I'm not lying to hurt you, Minjun. I'm lying to keep you safe. There's a difference. Safe from what? From the third-floor landing, Taehyun's voice cut through the darkness. From me. He descended the stairs, still wet from the rain, shirt clinging to his frame. But his eyes weren't on me, they were on his son. Minjun straightened, the vulnerability vanishing behind a mask I recognized. The Ice King in miniature. Go to bed, Taehyun said, but his voice was gentler than I'd ever heard it. Barbara and I need to talk. Are you going to fire her? Minjun's voice cracked. Hannah will cry for a week. She only eats breakfast if Barbara makes the eggs in that specific pan. Something shifted in Taehyun's expression, a crack in the armor. No one's being fired. Now go. Minjun looked between us, then nodded. As he passed his father, he paused. She comes back, Dad. Every time. That should count for something. He disappeared up the stairs, leaving us in the suffocating quiet. Taehyun turned to me, jaw tight. The Kit Tyler. Now. I didn't turn on the light. Neither did he. Taehyun was standing by the window, silhouette hard-edged and dangerous. He was still wet from the rain, shirt clinging to the broad muscles of his back. The Hunts Point Market is a dangerous place for a nanny, he said, voice a low growl vibrating with jealousy he had no right to feel. I set my glass down on the marble counter. The sound was like a gavel. And the roof of a brownstone is a cold place for a widower. You should have stayed inside, Taehyun. He turned, eyes predatory in the dim streetlight. He crossed the Kit Tyler in 3 strides, moving so fast I didn't have time to breathe before he was in my space, hands slamming onto the counter on either side of me. The heat radiating off him was physical. I felt the dampness of his clothes seeping into mine. He leaned down, face inches from mine, eyes roving over my features with frantic, desperate intensity. What was in the case, Barbara? Supplies, I whispered. My pulse was a frantic bird in my throat. I saw the dark centers of his eyes bloom, swallowing the iris. Things you aren't ready to handle. I'm tired of riddles. He reached out, thumb catching my bottom lip, pulling it down just enough to reveal the white of my teeth. The possessive gesture made liquid heat pool in my stomach. You come into my house, you touch my children, you haunt my sleep, and then you meet men who want my head on a platter. I go into the dark so you don't have to. I reached up, hands sliding up his wet chest, feeling the frantic thrum of his heart through silk. I didn't push him away. I pulled him closer until our bodies were fused from chest to knee. He let out a jagged, broken sound, half sob, half growl. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, stubble grazing my skin. He didn't kiss me. He just inhaled, chest heaving against mine. I should kill you, he whispered into my skin. End this before you ruin me. Then do it. I tilted my head back, exposing my throat. But we both know you'd rather be ruined by me than saved by anyone else. His grip on the counter tightened until I thought the marble might crack. The world stopped. Only the sound of our breathing and rain hitting glass. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye, expression raw with unadulterated longing. One day you're going to tell me everything. And when you do, I'm going to make sure you never have a reason to leave this house again. He backed away, disappearing into the hallway shadows before I could find my voice. I stood there, shivering in the Kit Tyler's heat, lips still tingling where his thumb had rested. I looked at the briefcase hidden behind the pantry door. The countdown had begun.
Morning came with Hannah's scream. I was out of bed before conscious thought, weapon drawn, heart hammering. I hit the nursery at a dead run, expecting blood, expecting intruders. Instead, I found my 6-year-old daughter standing on her bed, pointing at the window. The bird is back, Daddy. The red one. Barbara said if I was very quiet, it would come. Barbara stood by the window, still in her silk robe, a plate of seeds in her hand. She looked at me, at the gun in my hand, my bare chest heaving, the wild panic in my eyes, and something soft crossed her face. It's a cardinal, she said quietly. Hannah's been watching for it all week. I lowered the weapon, adrenaline still making my hands shake. Hannah bounced on the bed, oblivious to the violence coiled in my body. Barbara says cardinals are messages from heaven. Maybe it's from Mommy. The room went very still. I looked at Barbara, expecting to see manipulation, expecting to see her using my dead wife to secure her position. Instead, I saw something that made my chest ache, genuine tenderness as she helped Hannah off the bed. "Your mom loved birds," Barbara said, smoothing Hannah's sleep-tangled hair. "She probably sent this one to check on you. So you have to be brave and strong, okay? Make her proud." Hannah nodded solemnly, then looked at me. "Are you making Mommy proud, Daddy?" The question was a knife between my ribs. "I'm trying, little bird," I managed. "Then why do you look so sad all the time?" She tilted her head, So-Yoon's expression on her small face. "Barbara says sad people forget how to see the good things. That's why she makes us point out 3 good things at breakfast." I looked at Barbara again. She wasn't meeting my eyes, focused on tying Hannah's robe. "What were your 3 good things yesterday?" I heard myself ask. Hannah counted on her fingers. The cardinal came close. Minjun let me use his telescope. And Barbara made Dad smile when she fixed his coffee the wrong way on purpose. "I did not," Barbara started. "You put salt instead of sugar," I said, the memory surfacing. "You were watching me when I took that first sip." Our eyes met across Hannah's head. Barbara's lips curved slightly. "You needed to feel something other than rage. Disgust counts." 3 good things, Daddy," Hannah pressed. "Your turn." I crouched down to my daughter's level, but I kept my eyes on Barbara. "My children are safe." The cardinal came back. "And the person protecting you is better at it than I knew." Something shifted in Barbara's expression, a crack in her own armor. "Okay, Miss Hannah," Barbara said, voice slightly rough. "Let's get you ready for school. Your dad needs to get dressed before he scares the staff." As they walked past me, Hannah grabbed my hand. "Barbara says breakfast tastes better when you eat with people. You should try it, Daddy." After they left, I stood in the nursery, gun still in my hand, staring at the cardinal on the windowsill. "What were you thinking, So-Yoon? What did you see in her that I'm only now beginning to understand?" The basement cellar held more than servers and wine. It held silence. I was there that evening, surrounded by vintages So-Yoon collected, and I never opened. The heavy door creaked. I didn't turn. I knew her step, the sharp, unapologetic click of a woman who refused to creep. Barbara walked into the cellar, still wearing that leather jacket that smelled of Bronx streets and secrets I hadn't authorized. "Drinking alone in the dark, Taehyun," she said, voice vibrating against stone walls. "Bad look for a king. Looks a lot like hiding." I turned then. The movement was a blur. I hunted her through narrow wine racks until I had her backed against the far wall floor-to-ceiling glass. I didn't stop until I felt the cold air clinging to her leather. I pulled the tactical knife from my belt, matte black steel reflecting nothing but hunger in my eyes. I brought the edge up, cold metal biting into the soft skin under her jaw. "Where were you, Barbara?" My voice was jagged, stripped of everything but raw need to know. I saw her pulse hammer against the blade's flat. A single bead of sweat rolled down her temple. I expected fear. I wanted fear. It was the only currency I knew. But her eyes were like dark pools of oil, deep and unreadable. "I told you," she breathed, chest rising against mine. "I was doing what you're too blind to do yourself. I am the syndicate." I pressed the blade a fraction harder, not enough to draw blood, but enough to make her feel the end's proximity. "Nothing happens in this borough without my word. You're buying military hardware. Meeting with vipers. Tell me you're not a spy. Tell me I shouldn't bury you under these floorboards right now." I leaned in, face inches from hers. I saw gold flecks in her irises, felt heat fighting the cold steel. "Do it," she challenged, voice low and sultry. "If you think I'm the threat, end it. But we both know that's not why your heart is trying to beat out of your chest."
The steel was cold against my throat, sharp reminder of what Taehyun was. Killer. Monster. And God help me, I'd never wanted him more than when he held my life in his hand. I felt his rage vibrate through the blade. His hand wasn't shaking, but his body was fine, high-tension tremor of a man at his breaking point. He smelled of whiskey, rain, and possessive desperation starting to mirror my own. "You think this is about the syndicate?" I asked, voice steady despite cold metal sending shivers down my spine. I reached up slowly, deliberately. I didn't grab the knife. I wrapped my fingers around his wrist, feeling thick, corded muscle and his pulse's frantic thrum. "You think this is about business?" I stepped closer, forcing him to either cut me or retreat. He didn't retreat. "You're not angry because I met a rival. You're angry because you realized I have a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for you to notice I'm in the room." His eyes flickered. The Ice King was cracking, blue-cold mask melting into something far more dangerous, raw, human jealousy. "I notice you," he hissed, grip on my neck tightening, thumb pressing into my throat's side. "I notice how you breathe when you think I'm not looking. How you look at my children with love that should have died with my wife. And I notice how much I want to break you just so I'm the only one who can put you back together." He dropped the knife. It hit stone with a dull thud forgotten. His hand replaced the blade, fingers splaying across my throat, thumb tilting my head back. He slammed his other hand against the glass behind my head, sound echoing like thunder. "Who gave you the money, Barbara?" he demanded, face so close his lips brushed mine as he spoke. "Who are you working for?" "I'm working for a ghost," I whispered. I slid my hands into his hair, pulling him down into my space. I wasn't the nanny anymore. I wasn't the guardian. I was a woman who'd spent 3 years in a giant's shadow, and I was done being overlooked. And if you want to know her secrets, you're going to have to stop acting like a boss and start acting like the man she loved. He let out a jagged, broken growl, the sound of a man surrendering to his own ruin. He didn't kiss me, he devoured me. A collision of teeth and tongue, desperate and hungry, tasting of salt and whiskey. He pushed me against glass, cold surface contrasting with the furnace of his body. His hands were everywhere, in my hair, on my waist, pulling me into him like he was trying to merge our souls. I matched his hunger, nails digging into his shoulders through his shirt. This wasn't romance, it was war. Truth forced out the only way we knew how. Through skin, through heat, through absolute refusal to let go. He pulled back an inch, forehead against mine, breathing ragged. His eyes were dark, almost black, filled with terrifying, absolute possession. "You're not going anywhere," he rasped, voice avow. "Not tonight. Not ever. You belong in this house. You belong to me." "I don't belong to anyone," I countered, though my body leaned into his, betraying every word. "But I'm the only one who can save you from what's coming, Taehyun. Remember that when you wake up in the dark." I pushed past him, leaving him among shadows and shattered composure. I didn't look back. I didn't have to. I felt his gaze on my back, a brand that would never fade. The glass wall had shattered. Now we were both standing in the wreckage.
The kiss in the cellar hadn't been an ending, it was a declaration of war. Since that night, the air in the brownstone had become a physical weight. Every time I passed Barbara in the hall, my skin felt like it was on fire. We didn't speak of it. We didn't have to. The way she avoided my gaze while her hand lingered a second too long on the coffee cup she handed me said everything. I was in my study, staring at the ledger of the South Bronx warehouse, when my phone vibrated with a jagged rhythmic pulse. It was the shadow tracker, the one I had secretly slipped into Barbara's leather jacket after the cellar incident. She was moving. Fast. 2 miles away, near the Bruckner Expressway, in an area where my influence was thin and the Vipers, a splinter cell of the syndicate, held the corners. My blood turned to ice. She wasn't supposed to be out. I had told her to stay within the gates. I checked the dashcam feed I'd hacked from her car. The video was a blur of rain and neon. Suddenly, a black sedan lunged from a side street, ramming her rear fender. The camera jerked. The sound of metal screaming against metal echoed through my speakers. "Barbara," I breathed, my heart hammering against my ribs. A second car swerved in front of her, boxing her in. 4 men stepped out, faces obscured by balaclavas, hands holding heavy-caliber iron. My breath hitched. This wasn't a warning. This was an abduction. I didn't call for backup. There wasn't time. I grabbed my coat and my Kimberpoint .45, sprinting for the garage. As I tore through the Bronx streets on my bike, weaving through traffic like a madman, a singular thought burned in my brain. If they touch her, I will turn this entire borough into a graveyard. I arrived just as the rain turned into a deluge. I skidded to a halt a block away, sliding into the shadows of an overpass. I could see her car, shattered glass littering the pavement, engine still smoking. But as I raised my weapon, preparing to charge, I stopped. The scene wasn't what I expected. Two of the gunmen were already on the ground, clutching their legs. Barbara was standing behind the open door of her car, stance wide, movements a cold, calculated blur of efficiency. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. She held a subcompact 9mm in a firm, two-handed grip. Pop, pop. Two precise shots echoed under the bridge. A third man slumped against a concrete pillar. She wasn't a nanny in trouble. She was a professional under fire.
The adrenaline tasted like copper in the back of my throat. When the first car hit me, I didn't panic. Panic is a luxury for people who haven't spent 3 years preparing for the inevitable. I reached for the weapon tucked into my door's side pocket before the glass had even finished falling. "Get out of the car!" One of them screamed, voice muffled by his mask. I didn't answer. I rolled out the passenger side, using the engine block as cover. I felt the heat of a bullet whistle past my ear, a sharp, stinging reminder that my late nights had finally caught up with me. I took them down one by one. I didn't aim for the chest. I aimed for the joints. I needed them alive. I needed to know who had given the order. The fourth man, the leader, was smarter. He stayed behind his door, laying down suppressive fire. I was pinned. My breath came in short, sharp stabs, lungs burning in the cold air. My hand was slick with rain and a small cut from the window glass, but my grip remained steady. Then I heard it. The roar of a high-performance engine, followed by the screech of tires that sounded like a war cry. Taehyun. He didn't come in with a plan. He came in like a force of nature. He cleared the sidewalk in a dead sprint, coat billowing behind him like a dark cape. He didn't even look for cover. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession, muzzle flashes illuminating his face, a mask of such pure, unadulterated rage that it made my heart stop for a different reason. The last gunman dropped his weapon and tried to run, but Taehyun was on him in seconds. He tackled the man into a pile of rusted trash cans, fists moving with brutal, rhythmic violence. "Taehyun, stop!" I shouted, stumbling out from behind my car. He didn't hear me. He was hunched over the man, hand wrapped around the guy's throat, lifting him off the ground. He looked like a demon in the yellow glow of the street lamps, shirt soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, knuckles dripping with someone else's blood. I ran to him, grabbing his arm. His muscles were like braided steel, vibrating with tension that felt like it might snap. "He's done, Taehyun. He's done." He spun on me, weapon raised, eyes wide and wild. For a split second, I saw the killer, the king of the Bronx who didn't recognize friend from foe. I didn't flinch. I stepped into his space, pressing my chest against the barrel of his gun, my hand sliding up to cup his face. "Look at me," I whispered, voice a steady anchor in the storm. "I'm okay. Look at me." The fire in his eyes flickered. He blinked, recognition slowly washing over him. He lowered the gun, breathing coming in jagged, ragged gasps. He looked at me, really looked at me, tracing the small cut on my cheek with a trembling thumb. "You're bleeding," he rasped, voice breaking. "It's just glass," I said. Before I could say anything else, he pulled me into him. It wasn't the aggressive, possessive grip from the cellar. This was desperate. His face buried in my neck, hands clutching the back of my leather jacket, as if he were trying to pull me inside his own skin. I could feel his heart hammering against mine, a frantic, terrified beat. "I thought I was too late," he whispered into my hair. "I thought. I lost the only thing that mattered. This story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. But first, do me a favor, let me know where you're watching from tonight. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you're new here, subscribe now to unlock the rest of this chapter. Let's get into it." He pulled back, hands framing my face. His thumbs brushed rain from my eyelashes. The boss was gone. There was only the man, raw and exposed in the middle of a Bronx street surrounded by bodies. "Who are you, Barbara?" he asked, voice a low, pained plea. "What were you doing here?" "I was meeting the man who sold Soyun the car she died in," I said, voice dropping to a whisper as I saw shock register in his eyes. "The accident wasn't an accident, Taehyun. And the people who did it, they're in your house." The sirens began to wail in the distance. Taehyun didn't move. He just stared at me, the world around us dissolving until there was nothing but the truth between us. "Get in my car," he commanded, the Ice King returning. But this time, he wasn't looking at me with suspicion. He was looking at the world with a promise of total annihilation. "We're going home. Then we're going to the safe house. And you're going to tell me everything while I clean these cuts."
The safe house was a small apartment in Riverdale I kept for emergencies. It was sparse, a bed, a table, a bathroom, and enough weapons to start a small war. But right now, it felt like the only safe place in the world. Barbara sat on the edge of the bathtub, still in her torn clothes, blood drying on her temple. I knelt in front of her with a first aid kit, my hands steadier than they'd been all night. "This might sting," I said, dabbing antiseptic on the cut. She didn't flinch. She just watched me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You didn't have to come," she said softly. "I had it handled." "I know." I smoothed a butterfly bandage over the cut, my thumb lingering on her cheekbone. "I came anyway." "Why?" I sat back on my heels, looking at her, really looking. Her hair was a mess, her jacket was ruined, and she'd just killed 3 men without breaking a sweat. And she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Because somewhere between the first time you looked at me like I was full of shit and tonight, when I thought I'd lost you, I forgot how to breathe without knowing you were safe. Her eyes widened slightly. "Taehyun." "I'm not asking you to say it back," I said, standing up and pulling her to her feet. "I'm not even sure I know what it is yet. But I need you to understand something, Barbara. This isn't about the syndicate. This isn't about duty or protection or whatever So-Yoon hired you for." I pulled her close, wrapping my arms around her, just holding her. No heat. No aggression. Just holding. "This is about the fact that when I saw that car hit you, I didn't think about the business or my reputation or the Bronx. I thought about Hannah asking where you were. I thought about Min-Jun counting the seconds until you came home. I thought about never hearing you call me out on my bullshit again." I felt her arms come around my waist, her face pressing into my chest. "I thought about never getting to do this," I whispered into her hair. "Just stand here. With you. And feel like maybe I'm not completely broken." She was shaking. Not from fear or cold, but from something else, something that felt like relief. "You're not broken, Taehyun," she said, voice muffled against my shirt. "You're just tired of carrying everything alone." "Then help me," I said. "Not as the nanny. Not as the operative. Just as you. Stay. Please." She pulled back just enough to look up at me, and her eyes were wet. "3 good things," she whispered. "What?" "It's something I do with the kids. Every day, we name 3 good things. Even on the worst days. Especially on the worst days." She reached up, fingers tracing the line of my jaw. "You want to know mine today?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I survived. You came for me. And right now, in this bathroom that smells like bleach and gun oil, I feel safer than I have in 3 years." I kissed her then. Not with the desperate hunger of the cellar or the possessive fury of before. This was soft. Tender. A promise that felt like coming home. When we broke apart, she was smiling, a real genuine smile that made her whole face light up. "We should get cleaned up," she said. "Then I need to tell you everything. About So-Yoon. About the plan. About why I've been lying to you for 3 years." "I know." I pressed my forehead to hers. "But first, just 5 more minutes. Let me have this for 5 more minutes." She nodded, and we stood there in that dingy bathroom, holding each other while the Bronx raged outside. Just a man and a woman, finding peace in the eye of the storm. 5 perfect minutes. We weren't the boss and the operative. We were just Taehyun and Barbara. And it was enough. Quick check-in before the chaos begins. Where are you watching from? Type it below. Also, if you're enjoying the vibe, make sure you're subscribed. Alright, no more waiting. Let's dive back in.
We sat at the small table, coffee growing cold between us. I had my encrypted laptop open, the screen casting blue light across both our faces. So-Yoon came to me 18 months before she died. I began. She was already suspicious. Small things, Jae-young asking too many questions about your schedule, security protocols changing without your approval, money moving in ways that didn't match the books. Taehyun's jaw was tight, but he didn't interrupt. She hired my firm, Private Intelligence Corporate Security. We specialize in embedded protection. She didn't want a bodyguard. She wanted someone who could get close to the operation without raising flags. So she hired you to be the nanny. She hired me to be a ghost. The nanny role gave me access to the house, to the staff, to the children. It let me build a network without anyone questioning why I was there. I pulled up a file, photos, documents, wire transfers. Jae-young has been planning this for 3 years. He didn't just want you dead. He wanted the syndicate restructured. Your death needed to look natural, unplanned. So he started with So-yoon. Taehyun's hands curled into fists on the table. The car accident was a field test. Remote kill switch on the brake system. Clean. No evidence. But So-yoon knew something was wrong. In her last month, she gave me everything: offshore accounts, safe house locations, custody arrangements for the kids, and this. I turned the laptop toward him. On the screen was a video file dated 3 years ago. I hit play. So-yoon's face filled the screen. She looked tired but determined, sitting in what I recognized as her private study. Taehyun, if you're watching this, I'm gone. And if Barbara is showing you this, it means she kept her promise. Taehyun's breath caught. I know you're angry. I know you feel betrayed that I kept secrets. But I need you to understand, I didn't hire Barbara because I didn't trust you. I hired her because I love you too much to let you face this alone. So-yoon's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Jae-young is going to try to take everything. But he's wrong about one thing. You're not weak because you love our children. You're not weak because you grieve. You're the strongest man I know, and you're going to survive this. She leaned closer to the camera. Barbara is going to protect our babies. She's going to gather the evidence. And when the time comes, she's going to make sure you have a choice: revenge or justice. Choose justice, my love. Choose to be the man our children need. So-yoon smiled then, sad and beautiful. And Taehyun, when this is over, and you're standing in the rubble of everything we built, let yourself love again. Let yourself be happy. I'm giving you permission. Barbara is. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Special. She's strong enough to stand beside you. Trust her. And maybe, if you're very lucky, she'll trust you back. The video ended. The silence in the safe house was absolute. I looked at Taehyun. Tears were streaming down his face, silent, unstoppable. He wasn't the Ice King. He wasn't the boss. He was just a man, watching his dead wife give him permission to live. She knew, he whispered. She knew about us before we did. She was a very smart woman, I said softly. He stood up abruptly, walking to the window, shoulders shaking. I gave him a moment, then went to him. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, my cheek against his back. I miss her, he said, voice breaking. God, I miss her so much. And I feel like I'm betraying her by wanting you. You're not betraying her, I said firmly. She literally just told you not to. Taehyun, So-yoon didn't hire me to replace her. She hired me to make sure you survived long enough to find yourself again. He turned in my arms, looking down at me with red-rimmed eyes. Do you love me? He asked. The question was raw, vulnerable, completely unlike him. Yes, I said simply. I've loved you since the first time Hannah had a nightmare, and you sang her back to sleep in Korean. I've loved you since Minjun asked you about the stars, and you stayed up all night learning constellations just to answer him. I've loved you through every moment you thought you were being a terrible father when you were actually being exactly what they needed. I don't deserve you. Probably not, I said, and he laughed, a broken, wet sound. But you're stuck with me anyway. So-yoon made sure of that. He kissed me then, and I tasted salt and grief and hope all mixed together. Tomorrow, he said against my lips. Tomorrow we end Jae-young. Tonight, just stay with me. Let me hold you. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. And I didn't. We moved to the bed, and Taehyun pulled me against his chest, arms wrapped tight around me. There was nothing sexual about it. Just two people who'd been fighting alone for too long, finally finding peace in each other. Barbara? Yeah. 3 good things. I smiled into the darkness. So-yoon's message. You trusting me. This. Being here. With you. Not having to pretend anymore. His arms tightened. 3 good things, he echoed. You're safe. I know the truth. And tomorrow we fight back. Together, I added. Together, he agreed. And for the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep without my weapon in reach. Because I was exactly where I needed to be.
The exterior street processing plant was a corpse of industrial ambition, rusted metal bones and shattered windows that whistled in the wind. I parked 3 blocks away, moving through shadows with Barbara at my side. She'd changed into tactical gear, Kevlar vest, thigh holsters, hair braided tight. She moved differently now that the mask was off. No more Nanny. This was the operative So-yoon had hired. 3 exits, she whispered, pulling up the building schematic on her phone. Jae-young will have men at 2. The 3rd, the loading dock, has a blind spot. 17 seconds between camera sweeps. You've been planning this. For 3 years. She looked at me, eyes hard. The question is, do you want him arrested or eliminated? I thought of So-yoon. Of Min-jun counting my pacing. Of Hannah asking if I was making her mother proud. I want the truth on record, I said. I want him to live long enough to watch everything he built burn down around him. Barbara nodded. Then we record the meeting. Get him confessing. I have contacts in the FBI, Agent So-yoon vetted. They'll move once we have evidence. You've really thought of everything. I learned from the best. Her voice softened. So-yoon spent the last year of her life building a cage for the man who was already planning to kill her. She knew, Tae-hyun. She knew, and she protected you anyway. The grief was a physical weight, but underneath it was something else, purpose. Let's finish this. We got inside through a rusted ventilation shaft. The processing floor was a cathedral of decay, lit by flickering work lights strung between support beams. Below, Jae-young stood with 3 Seoul representatives, a briefcase open between them. Barbara set up the directional microphone, hands steady. Complete transfer of the Bronx routes for $15 million, Jae-young was saying. Tae-hyun is compromised. Distracted by his children and that nanny. He's weak. The syndicate needs leadership willing to make hard choices. Like killing his wife, one of the Seoul men asked. My blood turned to ice. Collateral damage, Jae-young said smoothly. So-yoon was making him soft. Family man, bedtime stories. That's not what the syndicate needs. I did what was necessary. Barbara's hand found mine in the dark, squeezing once. Anchor. Promise. Got it, she whispered, tapping the recorder. Full confession. Below, movement. 6 armed men emerged from the shadows, Jae-young's private security. We're not alone, I breathed. Barbara was already moving, pulling a second weapon. New plan. I'll create a distraction at the east exit. You get to the control room and lock down the building. Trap them inside until FBI arrives. That leaves you exposed. I've been exposed for 3 years. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not for herself. For me. Tae-hyun, if this goes wrong. I kissed her. Hard and fast and desperate. It won't. We're walking out of here together. 3 good things, she whispered against my lips. Promise me you'll think of 3 good things when this is over. You. The kids. Breakfast together. She smiled, small, real, devastating. Hold that thought. Then she was gone, sliding down a support beam into the chaos below.
I hit the ground and rolled, coming up firing. Not at the men, at the lights. Glass exploded, plunging half the room into darkness. Contact east side, someone shouted. I moved through shadows like water, training taking over. Disarm, disable, don't kill. These men were pawns. The king was still standing in the center, briefcase in hand. Jae-young's eyes found me across the room. The nanny, he breathed. I knew you were too good to be true. I'm better than you deserve, I called back, dropping 2 more guards with precise shots to their knees. Then I heard it, the heavy metal groan of the loading dock doors sealing. Tae-hyun had reached the controls. We were locked in. FBI is 3 minutes out. I shouted to Tae-hyun through comms. Hold position. But Jae-young was moving, sprinting for the executive offices where a private elevator still functioned. I ran after him, boots pounding metal catwalks. He made it to the elevator, slamming the button. As the doors started to close, I dove, wedging my body between them. Going somewhere? He swung the briefcase. I blocked, but the impact sent me stumbling. He was out of the elevator, knife in hand, the same style blade Tae-hyun had held to my throat. So-yoon begged, he hissed, circling me. At the end, she begged me to spare her children. Rage, white-hot and absolute, flooded my system. She didn't need to beg, I said, voice deadly calm. She already had insurance. Me. I didn't give him time to process. I moved, 3 years of suppressed violence finally unleashed. Disarm, break his wrist, sweep his legs. He went down hard, knife skittering across concrete. I put my knee on his chest, weapon to his temple. You're going to tell Tae-hyun everything. You're going to look him in the eye and confess. And then you're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing you lost to a nanny. Sirens. Flashlights. FBI. Hands where we can see them. I raised my hands, stepping back as agents swarmed the building.
They let me see him through the glass of the interrogation room. Jay Young, broken, handcuffed, finally small. Do you want to talk to him? The FBI agent asked. I thought about it. Thought about all the words I'd saved, all the rage, all the grief. No, I said finally. He's already dead to me. What I wanted was upstairs, in the medical bay, getting her temple stitched. Barbara looked up when I entered, and despite the blood and the exhaustion, she smiled. 3 good things, she said. I crossed the room, cupping her face in my hands. The bastard's in custody. My children are safe. And the woman I love just saved my life. Her eyes widened. Taehyun. I love you, I said, the words feeling foreign and right all at once. I've loved you since you first looked at me like I was a man instead of a monster. I just forgot how to recognize it. She pulled me down, kissing me soft and slow and real. 3 good things, she whispered. You finally said it. The nightmare's over. And tomorrow, we have breakfast. Together. As a family. As a family.
The brownstone had been rebuilt. Not the same, better. New security, new staff, new foundation. Literal and metaphorical. I stood in the Kit Tyler, making eggs in the specific pan Hannah required, while morning sun streamed through windows that no longer felt like prison bars. Barbara! Hannah called from the dining room. Minjun is trying to read at the table again. Knowledge is never wrong. Minjun protested. Your sister has a point, Taehyun said, and I heard the smile in his voice. Breakfast is for family, not physics. I carried the eggs out to find my family, and yes, they were mine now, seated at the table. Taehyun had Hannah on his lap, helping her practice writing her name. Minjun was sneaking glances at his book under the table. Caught you, I said, but I was smiling. Taehyun looked up, and the expression on his face still took my breath away. Open. Soft. Home. 3 good things, he said. It had become our ritual. Hannah slept through the night. Minjun's science project won first place. And my wife looks beautiful in the morning. We're not married, I pointed out, setting down plates. Yet. He pulled a small box from his pocket. The Kit Tyler went silent. Barbara Tyler, he said, standing, and I realized he was shaking slightly. You saved my life. You saved my children. You saved me from myself. I'm not asking you to be my queen or my possession, or any of the dramatic nonsense I said in the dark. Then what are you asking? I'm asking if you'll be my partner. My equal. My home. He opened the box. The ring was simple, a single diamond, elegant and unassuming. Marry me. Not because you're the nanny or the bodyguard or the woman who knows all my secrets. Marry me because I can't imagine counting 3 good things in a world where you're not beside me. Hannah was bouncing. Minjun had abandoned his book entirely. Say yes. Hannah demanded. Please say yes. I already drew pictures of the wedding. I looked at this man, this complicated, damaged, beautiful man, and at the children who'd become my heartbeat. 3 good things, I said, voice thick. You asked. You meant it. And the answer is yes. The kids erupted in cheers. Taehyun slid the ring on my finger, then kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. Thank you, he whispered against my lips. For what? For staying, even when I gave you every reason to run. I told you, I said, pulling him close. I don't run. I protect what's mine. Daddy's crying, Hannah observed. Happy tears, little bird, Taehyun said, voice rough. Very happy tears. Minjun looked at me seriously. Does this mean you're officially our mom now? The question hung in the air. I crouched down to his level. If that's okay with you. He thought about it with his usual careful deliberation. Then he nodded. Yeah, I think Mom would approve. She picked you after all. She did, I agreed. And I'm going to spend every day proving she made the right choice.
That night, after the children were asleep, I found Barbara on the roof, our spot now, no longer a place for surveillance but for breathing. Thinking about running? I asked, wrapping my arms around her from behind. Always, she said, but she leaned into me. Old habits. Good thing I'm very motivated to give you reasons to stay. She turned in my arms, and the city lights made her eyes shine. Taehyun, are you sure? The life I lived before, the things I've done, are the reasons we're alive, I finished. Barbara, you're not your past any more than I'm mine. We're what we choose to be from this moment forward. And what are you choosing? To be a father. A husband. A man my children can be proud of. I kissed her forehead. What are you choosing? To trust, she whispered. To let myself be loved. To build something real. 3 good things. She smiled. You. The kids. This. She gestured to the skyline. All of it. Below us the Bronx hummed. Still dangerous, still raw, still home. But now it was a home I was building with someone who saw me. Not the boss. Not the king. Just Tae-hyun. The man who'd been lost until a nanny with secrets and a tactical vest showed him what it meant to be found. Come to bed, Barbara said, taking my hand. Tomorrow's going to be busy. Min-jun wants you to teach him chess, Hannah needs new shoes, and I have a meeting with a contractor about the nursery addition. Nursery addition? She raised an eyebrow. You didn't think we were stopping at 2, did you? I laughed, deep and real and unfamiliar. 3 good things, I said. Now and always. Now and always, she echoed. And for the first time in years, I believed tomorrow would be better than today.
And that is where we leave them for now. This story has been a journey to create, and I'd love to know your favorite moment from today's episode. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from if you missed the intro. Subscribe to the channel to stay part of this story. Thank you for watching.